tragedy of the death of George Floyd actually is given hope.
Absolutely.
People come together, not just in the USA, but all over the world, because of that 8 minutes 46 seconds that he was killed in.
Yeah. The price of change has always been paid in blood.
Yes.
That's what's so sad.
Yes.
That's what's so sad. And I'm still choked up of watching that man suffer under that policeman's knee for 8 minutes 46 seconds. That time will never leave my mind. I can't tell you which way it's going to go, and I can't tell you right now it's not going to be painful. It will be. Britain, I say Britain, has arrived somewhere where the people who created the history, who wrote the history books, are not quite ready for. People started pulling statues off these plinths. And what's happened? Oh, we don't want you to pull the statue because that's our history. That's not history. That's a stone. That's a block of stone. And the reason why they're being pulled off is because the people who pulled them off have learned their history in books.
The Colston statue, which is the most prominent and significant, was not put up immediately after he died anyway.
No.
It was put up more than a century later by a group of Victorian businessmen in Bristol. I have no idea what they thought they were doing. It's been a subject of controversy ever since. I remember Bernie Grant and myself at a meeting in the Colston Hall in 1976, 7, 8, somewhere around that period, complaining then about Colston, the statue and the name and so on. The debate is not new.
A minority created it. A minority profited from it. That same minority have still got the money, and that minority are now very frightened of losing it, because will the majority turn on them? I don't want anybody to turn on anybody else. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is make sure that Britain has a clear understanding of where it came from, how much the people from the Caribbean have actually put into this country even before they arrived, and how much Africa lost when it lost its people from the Caribbean. Which is why when you look at an English history book now, you're looking at some mendacities of centuries, and which is a great pity, because we can't teach our children mendacities. Yeah. We have to teach our children, irrespective how much it hurts. It doesn't matter how much it hurts. We have to teach our children the truth.
You describe in this book the way in which a white English guy becomes a slave overseer and becomes the most brutal monster possible. What got into his head and where and when that he was taught that he was superior to the life he was taking?
I remember when I was telling my editor about the slave nets. People were leaving their homeland crying, and some of them jumped overboard. These ship's masters saw, my God, that's profit. Every single body that leapt overboard was profit. So they then erected these slave nets right round the vessel, like a skirt, like an upturned skirt, so that if they ran along the deck and leapt over the gunwales, they'd land in the nets. Also, that tells you the cruelty of slavery. Just how cruel it was to think, we're going to even stop you from taking your own life. Why? Because we own your life, and we want to make sure you understand that. You belong to us. This whole concept, this idea that you can go around taking people and from their land and then telling your people they had no history, they had no culture, they had no books, when they had all of those.
Perhaps we need more teaching of pre-colonial African history to understand the structures of society that were there, understand the majesty that was Africa, understand the hierarchies that were there, and the nonsense of the borders that Africa is. I mean, a great play would be a reenactment with backstories of the 1884 Congress of Berlin. When the European powers, with the Americans as an observer status, sat round a huge table in Berlin and basically got the pencils out and divided up Africa. And King Leopold never went there, but he stayed in Brussels the whole time and sent messages every day by carriage as to which bit of the Congo he wanted. It wasn't even for Belgium, it was for him.
It was for him.
It was his personal property.
This is what I'm bringing you back to now, which is slavery and colonialism never pays, and you always have to pay the price. And sometimes the price may not be paid right then, Unfortunately for our generation and our children's generation, it's us who's going to have to pay the price. It's now we're paying the price. So this thing that happened all that time ago is now coming full circle to us. And as much as the newspapers will probably do in the next little while, have to do everything they can to avoid the subject of slavery, it's calling. It's been calling for years. And slavery is something we have to pay back. We have to undo it. And all this nonsense about, well, we will never pay reparations. Well, I think in time you will.
The economic structures, the ownership structures and so on did not change at all.
Not at all. I mean, can you imagine, Jeremy, today, I went to Barbados in 74. I'd just done something with Muhammad Ali, actually. And I saw, and they're still there, the houses they live in. The house they live in half the size of this room. And there were chattel houses that the slaves had lived in.
The same chattel houses?
The same houses. I tell you something, the white rich were playing polo, and what they did, they sent across the polo field, ranging from about 5 or 6 years old to about 80 years old, whole series about black people on their hands and knees, picking out the seagrass so it didn't hurt the horses' hooves. This was 74. What? And do you know what I did? I stood there and I cried. I just cried. I just bawled my eyes out. I could not. I mean, I'm always crying now because it still hurts. And I just thought, my God, this is just humiliation. This is now your island, but it isn't. Because the same people who owned the island when it was a slave island are still the majority of people who still own the island today. Well, that's got to stop.
Your books mention Spitalfields and the support that the white working class gave to slaves that were freed and living in Britain but in danger of being captured by slave catchers. But also the solidarity that came later on, the Lancashire cotton workers, their solidarity with the slaves in the southern states of the USA. And at enormous personal cost to themselves. It's those kind of acts of solidarity that I think we need to develop.
We've got to get into the heads of people today that the majority of people from Africa, the majority of people from Europe had nothing to do with it. They were almost as enslaved anyway. People like the Daily Mail have spent a lot of time trying to separate putting one against the other. That's not going to work, because the more they try, the more this history is going to come out. And the best thing they can do is help it come out. The pain will be over quicker.
In a weird kind of way, the corona crisis taught a lot of people a lot of things. One, that community matters. Two, that we're all in differing degrees at risk because of it. But also that the black community's incredible contribution to our health and education system, without that contribution, thousands and thousands more would have died.
A pandemic has actually brought around the very issues, the very situation that people thought would never happen. And it pulled us all back into our homes. In the middle of this thinking time, along comes George Floyd, who gets killed in the most horrendous way. If you close your eyes for 8 minutes, 46 seconds, then that's how long it took for that man to die. That's why the whole protest sprung up and keeps on springing up, because people can now imagine what it was like.
The tragedy of the death of George Floyd actually has given hope.
Absolutely.
People come together, not just in the USA, but all over the world, because of that 8 minutes, 46 seconds that he was killed in. And I just think that there is amazing opportunities for hope, and for young people, particularly all over the world, joining together to bring that about, because they understand power structures, they understand cultural unity and cultural difference.
If you look back in history, and we're still repeating that history, the price of change has always been paid in blood.
Yes.
That's what's so sad.
Yes.
That's what's so sad. And I'm still choked up of watching that man suffer under that policeman's knee for 8 minutes, 46 seconds. That time will never leave my mind. the price of change has always been paid in blood. When you misuse history and misteach history, the danger is George Floyd.
Yes.
That's the result. If anybody takes from our discussion a negative aspect, oh, you know, we think it's all terrible. No, there's great hope. There's a massive hope. Why? We've got a generation of our children who've decided to take it on and take on what we've been fighting for and take it on together. Yeah. That's what's hope. That's the hope we have in this country. So it doesn't matter what this government does or doesn't do. The fact that they will never stop their children linking on with the other children, black and white. They will never stop it. And that's the hope of the future, because we are going to make sure they and their children will be taught the history, the real history of what happened, how it happened and who did it.
After the Bristol bus boycott, Paul Stevenson persuaded Harold Wilson to bring in the Race Relations Act, which was
65.
Yeah, that's right, 65. Yeah. I remember an argument. I was, 16, 17 at the time in school. I was supportive of the Act and what it was trying to do. People said, oh, you can't change what's natural. And these boys who had grown up in predominantly farming communities in the Midlands, it was a small town, were sort of saying, well, it's all natural, isn't it? I said, no, it's not. They said, yeah, it is. And they were consciously or unconsciously deeply racist in their approach to all of this.
If you look at that and then you look forward, the United Kingdom is going to be a very exciting place because the United Kingdom is going to take on board these lessons. We haven't finished learning them yet.
No.
We've just only begun. And by the time we've finished learning these lessons, all the things that you see and people saying is natural today will be unnatural tomorrow.
Yeah. History is the most important subject.
Because history, as we know, is written by the victors. And they got away with it. Why? Because there's nobody there to challenge them.
So it is important to re-examine our history, learn from it, and make for a better and stronger future.
So support Double Down News
on Patreon.